Hi everyone, this is Elias Martin of CollectingJapanesePrints.com. Welcome to Woodblock Wednesday, where on Wednesday we get together to discuss Japanese prints, paintings, history, and culture. Today's Woodblock Wednesday is dedicated to one of the most important 20th century Bijinga artists within the Shin Hanga tradition. And I brought three wonderful examples of his work. And I could talk about him a little bit more, but without further ado, let's go to the table and look at the artwork while we discuss them. Okay, I'm going to back up, give you a little preview, and then I grab my cheat sheet so I have my dates and everything correct. These are the three works we'll be discussing. And so I'll sort of start with this work while we discuss the artist. His name is Hashiguchi Goyo, and Goyo is one of the most important 20th century Bijinga print artists. Chances are you've seen Goyo prints, either reproductions that are being sold today at the airport in Narita or throughout the world, including eBay and other online auctions. His work is constantly being reproduced because it's just so popular. The designs that he produced are so stunning. But I want to talk about his prints produced under his supervision, as well as some later printings done by the Goyo Institute in the 1950s. Basically, it was his family that reproduced some in the 50s. Those are actually impressions that are the most notable, particularly for collectors who are interested in Goyo. And, just a little bit of background on Goyo. Goyo got his start with, he was interested in ukiyo-e prints. And he was interested in the work of Utamaro. He idolized Utamaro. And Utamaro was considered sort of the pinnacle of printmaking that illustrated beautiful women. And his designs became iconic. His sensibility, his aesthetics of the feminine form became sort of the ideal for other woodblock print artists. And Goyo certainly took his cues from Utamaro and wanted to produce his own work, but within the vein of Utamaro. And when I say that, I want to point out one of the aspects of Goyo's prints. He used wonderful silver mica in the background, and that is seen on some of Utamaro's most iconic designs. And so, the silver mica prints, not all of them had mica, but by and large, most of them did. And so that is one element that Goyo borrowed from Utamaro. And of course, the motif in general. The Bijinga. Goyo did produce a couple landscape designs, but by and large, he's known for his images of beautiful women. And Goyo, like most Shin Hanga artists, got his start within the genre working for Watanabe. Watanabe hired him to produce one design, and he did, and they had a falling out, in fact. Goyo, it's sort of rumored that Goyo was very upset by the designs. He created the design, but he did not like how Watanabe produced it as a woodblock print. He felt that his design was way too flat, and I think he called it lifeless. And so, I have some reference books, and I think I'll pull an example from the reference book of what that print looked like. I actually don't mind it, but I do see what he means by it being kind of flat. And Goyo went on to be a very important independent print artist. Like Hiroshi Yoshida, who also had a falling out with Watanabe, he established his own studio and produced some stunning woodblock prints. Now, I should give you his dates. Goyo's dates are 1880, and he passed away in 1921. Unfortunately, he passed away very early in life and kind of unexpectedly. And so what we're looking at are three designs that were produced directly under his supervision in 1920. All three of them were produced in 1920. And it's quite sad because there were some designs that were never finished. And later the family produced them, but they were never finalized, and so the colors weren't decided upon by Goyo and other things. And so you could see those in the marketplace, and they're basically black and white prints. But anyway, let's focus on the three that I have here. As I said, these were produced directly under Goyo's supervision. Of course, Goyo, like Watanabe, established his own studio. He had woodblock carvers, he had woodblock printers, and more like Yoshida, he basically focused on the design. But Goyo was meticulous in terms of his attention to detail. And because he got into an argument with Watanabe, he certainly had his own ideas of what these prints should look like. And we see his mastery for the craft here in these three prints. Now, this first work is known as Girl Holding Lipstick, believe it or not. And what we have here is a young woman doing her lipstick. She's holding up a compact in a beautiful kimono with vivid colors. We have greens, we have yellows, and there's a pink and inner kimono that has chrysanthemum design in yellow, and then a obi that is bright red with blue and gold. I mean, the kimono is stunning, but also the woman's face is done with such delicate lines. I mean, it's just stunning to see. And of course, as I mentioned early on in our conversation, we have the beautiful silver mica background that has been carefully applied, and you see that it is exactly lining up around the image perfectly. So the registration of this impression, and in all of Goyo's I don't want to call it self-printed because they're not self-printed. Yoshida used the word jizuri, which really implies self-printing, but they're self-published designs strictly under his supervision. Now, I want to point out something for you connoisseurs, and this has never really been sort of published, but it is a secret that dealers use to determine early impressions being done in the 1920s versus the later impressions done in the 50s. And again, I should point out, in the 1950s, the Goyo Institute, which was basically his family members that put together this institute, they kept the original blocks and they reissued the designs. They reissued most of them, not all of them, most of them. And these three were designs that were reissued later. But there are some minor differences in those impressions. And this is why I love doing these videos, because they're important. And for collectors who are trying to develop an eye, as well as know these little secrets or tricks of the trade, I try to share as much as I have with all of you, so that all of you who are collectors can benefit from my years of experience, some of which have come at a cost. I've, like all dealers, have purchased things that weren't completely right or that were later, and you learn from your mistakes. I've been doing this for 20 some years, and I have learned from my mistakes. And so I want to point this out because this is important. The 1950s impressions, the mica is applied quite heavily. It's thicker on the surface of the paper. And on the actual Goyo self-governed prints under his supervision, you could see that the mica is printed very thinly, particularly in areas around the face, or sometimes you see light mica loss on the very edge of the design. And here you see it very faintly around the face. Now, a collector might see that and go, oh, well, I want my impression to look perfect. Well, you can certainly have that, but those perfect impressions with the mica being completely intact are 9 times out of 10, they are done later. They were done in the 50s. And as a collector and dealer, I would prefer to handle work that was done under Goyo's direct supervision. And so you see, I'll show you around the hand there. There is some area where the mica is not perfect, right around the hand. Again, it's not that there's losses. Over time, that mica has sort of rubbed off because the mica application was not as thick as the 1950s impression. And I think maybe the Goyo Institute used a thicker application of mica. It might have been easier to print in that way, but maybe they were addressing the issues of mica loss within the design. Who knows? But that is certainly a telltale sign of later printings. Now, as collectors might notice, there is no real difference right now in the marketplace between Goyo prints produced under his direct supervision in the 20s versus the ones done in the 50s. They were done with the same exact blocks, and the pigments are pretty much the exact same, and the paper is by and large about the same consistency. Now, there are some differences in seals on particular impressions, and we can go down that rabbit hole when I have those designs. And there's no consensus, I should point out, about the seals. But what I do know is the printing always reveals secrets. I mean, whether we're discussing first state Hasui prints published by Watanabe when the seals aren't consistent, or Goyo, the printing never lies. You can always figure it out by the impression and the printing techniques themselves. Okay, I said a lot about the connoisseurship of these prints, but I just want to just showcase how beautiful this design looks, particularly with the silver mica. Now, I have a light overhead that, in this case, is actually working with us, and you could see how the background shimmers. Now think about this. Most contemporary collectors here, we buy prints, we collect them, we frame them, or we put them away in sleeves, and we look at them in natural light or with a artificial light that provides us an ability to see the detail. But think about this. In 1920s Japan, people were looking at prints under candlelight as well. I mean, there was electricity, but it wasn't widespread. And certainly during Utamaro's time, in the Edo period, they were looking at prints, particularly prints with mica, under candlelight. And so imagine what the candlelight, what effects you would get from a print with mica. It becomes much more three-dimensional. And it really adds a stronger sort of, I don't know how to describe it, but the vibe, the energy of the experience of looking at these prints in candlelight, the experience certainly changes. I just want to show these fine lines. And of course, the fine lines of the eyebrows or the lines underneath the eye, the hairline, you see how well carved and printed that is. Under Goyo's direct supervision, he produced quite a few of these impressions, but they were very expensive during his life. And they weren't all that commercially successful, from what I understand. They sold well, but they weren't selling like hotcakes like a Hasui that Watanabe might have been selling. These prints were sold at a large premium because they were expensive to produce, particularly because of the mica and how well they are carved and printed. But because of that, a lot of these prints, there weren't that many that were produced under his supervision. I would say the vast majority that you see in the marketplace were produced in the 1950s, during the time that the Goyo Institute was issuing those impressions. And so It's also important to have the provenance. If you could figure out when the print was originally purchased, that would also help with identifying the date of the printing. But of course, as I said, printing also means quite a bit in discerning the time of printing. So I'm going to move on to the next work. What we have here is a work, again, done in 1920. It's called Woman in a Summer Kimono. So this kimono is kind of a sheer kimono. And the woman is in front of her mirror here, getting ready. And I just want to show, again, the background is done in this beautiful mica. And this print is known in a couple of versions. In this version, there's a gold background, gold or bronze background that's been printed. And then the silver mica has been applied over it. So it creates a warmer gold-like effect. You could kind of see the gold of the background coming through the mica. And again, because this design was published under Goyo's direct supervision in the 1920s, we see how thinly applied the mica is to the background. And you can even see the edges of the design of the pigment that rests under the mica. That is something you do want to see. I want to show how wonderful, the detail of the face is. That's just great. The hair. And again, you see a little bit of loss of mica, or a little thin area right by the neck. And he did a wonderful effect of the light coming through and showing the sheer quality of the kimono. I will say that the later printings sometimes don't have Goyo seals, or they have different seals. But in this case, this is the correct seal for this impression, as this seal is with this design. Now, the last work I want to show is a work that's titled "Woman in a Long Undergarment," or let me see what my notes say. Yeah, that's exactly right. This is another undergarment, and this was done in a kakemono-like format. So it's a long, sort of tanzaku-shaped print, echoing pillar-style sized prints that were produced in the Edo period. And in this design, what we have here is this wonderful silver application of mica, silver mica all around the figure. There's other versions of this design. There's one that echoes the printing of this one where it's more of a gold look, and that's from the underprinting of the mica. There's a gold background and then a silver application that looks more gold. But this is the silver version, and what we have here is this wonderful design with an intricate kimono. You may not be able to see it on the phone, but there's quite a bit of embossing on this kimono, which is also known as blind printing. So they carved the block with this intricate pattern, but did not add any pigment. It's basically just the lines of the block impressed into the print while the print was a little wet. And so it allowed that pattern that's been carved into the block to be impressed into the kimono. And when you look at this print in person, that embossing, which is substantial, it is probably the more active part of the design of the kimono. It gives effect of a textile. You look at this print and it really does look like a textile. It gives it texture, depth, and as a print collector, these embellishments on prints are just something you just love to see. And again, this is Goyo using every possible technique at his disposal to be able to produce a design that has technical mastery as well as just artistic I mean, it's just artistically, it's the best that one can produce at the time. Yes, her face is just so delicate with those fine lines of hair, particularly the smaller wisps of hair around the cheek and then the hairline at the and her forehead. Not to mention the eyelashes and the eyebrows, all of that. That's just so well done. I've seen this version later, a later printing of this version, and it was missing the seal, and again, the mica was applied rather thickly, and it just didn't have the same sort of oomph. Um, they're not bad. Those printings are actually quite good, particularly if you're comparing them to later printings of completely recarved blocks. Well, obviously, those are going to lack quite a bit of qualities within the originals. But the 50 impressions are okay. The point that I want to make is that I wouldn't spend my money on a 50s impression and paying real money for these prints when you could buy the earlier version. Both can be had in the marketplace. And so these aren't cheap. Goyo prints sell for $10,000 to $15,000. These are designs that sell for that price range. The larger prints sell for 25, 30, 40, 50,000. You know, when you're spending that kind of money and you want to get the earliest impressions possible. And again, learning how to discern that based on the printing is vital. It's absolutely vital. Well, I want to come in again and show how well printed this is. And of course, I'm going to angle this so you could see the wonderful application of mica on the print. I mean, just astonishing. When you really are able to see this in person, up close, and examine the printing effects, you just fall in love. And again, one last time, I'll go over the other two. And this, for me, is about his use of light and how the light goes through this sheer material, reveals the contours of her body. You see her arm through the sheer kimono, and how elegant and delicate this is, the background with the silver. And last, this design, very striking design, very colorful, of a young woman applying makeup or lipstick. Now, before I go, I want to point out there's several Goyo references in the marketplace, and these are the three main ones. Let me see if I can do this with one hand and show the Goyo design that he did for Watanabe. Now, this book is quite nice, and it shows a lot of his original paintings. This is it. This is the design, and I've had this design. I sold it. Actually, I've had it twice and sold it. It's a very expensive print, very rare. Legend has it, it was done in an edition of 100. Some people say 50. And Goyo took his share, which was half, and destroyed them. And since it was done during the pre-earthquake period, only the impressions that Watanabe sold in his shop prior to the earthquake survived. So a handful really only survived, and the rest were destroyed in the fire. So anyway, I wanted to show that. This is an excellent reference. All three are excellent references for different reasons, and they're all on my website in the bookstore. So if you're interested in them, go to collectingjapaneseprints.com, scroll down, go to the bookstore, and you'll be able to look at them. I have videos of each of these 3 books, so you could see through the book. And of course, if you want to decide to go ahead and buy it, shoot me an email and I'll be happy to assist you with that. So yeah, we got these 3 prints we discussed, and of course the 3 books. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining me on our latest edition of Woodblock Wednesday, where we discuss the work of Goyo, one of Shin Hanga's most important Bijinga artists. And I invite you all to visit my website to check out these 3 prints. I have a very detailed description of each work, as well as other work that might interest you. CollectingJapanesePrints.com is my site. And of course, I welcome all of you to next week for our next installment of Woodblock Wednesday. Until then, bye-bye.